oh man, Spidey's style just increased tenfold. Anyways, welcome back true believers and all you spectacular Spidey fans to another very exciting episode of Marvel's Spider-Man Miles Morales 101. And if you're someone who absolutely loved the incredible multitude of suits that were featured in Spider-Man PS4, then I think it's safe to say that you are going to be insanely hyped after hearing the amazing news that we're going to discuss today. So as you would expect, not only has Game Informer continued to display a sensational amount of coverage for Marvel's Spider-Man Miles Morales, but Insomniac Games themselves have also furthered their own coverage for Miles Morales with a bunch of brand new Daily Bugle articles. And what's better is that the most recent article that they did post does further break down the costumes that we can expect in Miles Morales' game. But before we dive into that, I do want to quickly break down some very important information which was recently revealed during the latest Game Informer coverage, primarily with the interview of the creative director of the game, Brian Horton. So yesterday, as part of the Miles Morales coverage, the main crew over at Game Informer did have a full-on in-depth interview with Brian Horton himself. And in case you haven't seen the entire interview for yourself just yet, I will leave a link to it in the description below. Because overall, this interview did an absolutely phenomenal job of fully going over everything as to what is going to make this game completely different from Spider-Man PS4, as well as how Insomniac Games is completely innovating the Spider-Man formula as well as Miles Morales' character as a whole. And even though Brian Horton does go over some information which we do already know about for the game, which I actually did cover in some of my previous 101 videos, there were some fresh tidbits of details that Brian did drop during the interview, which does get me extremely excited about the overall aesthetic of the game. So the first new detail that Brian went over during the interview, which I do think some of you might be a bit disappointed by, is that even though the entirety of Marvel's New York is set within the wintertime and is fully covered by snow, the snow itself is not going to be affecting Miles' traversal whatsoever. So for any of you out there who thought that Miles might slip once he does touch a surface within New York City that is covered by snow, that is actually not going to happen. And in short, the core traversal mechanics within Spider-Man Miles Morales, as well as the main design of Marvel's New York, are pretty much going to remain the exact same, simply with a fresh coat of paint. And based on the latest footage that was unveiled during the Brian Horton interview, I can 110% say that that is most definitely the case. Not to mention that actually seeing Miles' inexperienced web swinging in full force within the broader scope of the city simply looks gorgeous. And on top of that, we also received a slightly extended look at the initial Rhino encounter between both Peter and Miles. And if that's how much action is taking place at the very beginning of the game, I can only imagine what's going to happen by the time we get to the end. But moving on with the fresh details from the interview, Brian did officially confirm the return of the original Spider-Man PS4 composer, none other than John Paisano, taking up the mantle again for Miles Morales. But what gets me extremely hyped about this news is that alongside of John Paisano himself, Insomniac also brought in famous artists Boy Wonder and Lecrae to actually create a brand new feeling soundtrack, where the creators of Miles Morales' score have officially dubbed it orchestral synth pop. Now, I don't know about you guys, but in a similar fashion to Miles Morales himself within his most recent character bio, music is also a major part of my life as well. And just knowing that Insomniac is going all out to fully make Miles Morales' soundtrack completely unique and different from anything else we've ever heard before just makes me incredibly happy as a fellow music lover. And based on the bits of the soundtrack that we have heard so far, it's going to be an absolute treat to hear the entirety of it once the full game releases. Now, as for a factor that Brian brought up during the interview that does relate to the story, is actually that the main district of Harlem within Miles Morales is pretty much seen as its own unique character. Considering the fact that Miles' mom, Rio Morales, did grow up in East Harlem within this Spider-Man universe, as well as knowing that Miles has now moved into Harlem as his current home, it's surely going to turn into an extremely special place for both Miles as a character as well as us as the player as we spend more time within that district. However, even though Harlem itself is going to be a very impactful place for us to explore within the game, I do want to reiterate one more time that the overall map of Marvel's Manhattan that we were able to explore within Spider-Man PS4 is once again fully explorable here with Marvel's Spider-Man Miles Morales. And just knowing that the entirety of the city is going to be fully festive in the holiday season and covered in snow is going to make traversing around New York a completely different experience. And lastly, the final important detail that Brian did confirm during this interview is that exclusively for the PlayStation 5 version of Marvel's Spider-Man Miles Morales, there are indeed going to be no loading screens whatsoever. This is, of course, all in thanks to the brand new next-generation SSD that the PlayStation 5 is equipped with, which, if you don't know, is going to make loading brand new assets gets within next-generation games a truly seamless experience. Although the flip side of it, specifically in regards to the PlayStation 4 version of Miles Morales, is that edition of the game, just like Marvel's Spider-Man on PlayStation 4, is sadly going to have loading screens. And to quote Brian himself, he did state at the very end of the interview is that the PlayStation 5 version of Marvel's Spider-Man Miles Morales, as well as Marvel's Spider-Man Remastered, is going to be the most definitive versions when it comes to the best possible Spider-Man gaming experience. And even though the current gen version of Miles Morales is not going to come equipped with the fast-loading SSD as well as the ray-traced environments, Brian did make sure to say that the PS4 version of Miles Morales is still going to look beautiful, but rather the PS5 version is simply going to be the best experience possible. And coming from me personally, as someone who is sadly not able to acquire a PlayStation 5 pre-order in time, I'm still extremely happy that the PlayStation 4 version of Miles Morales will still be a rather enjoyable experience. Now, as for the meat and potatoes of the news is obviously in regards to the brand new details that we did receive for the suits within Marvel's Spider-Man Miles Morales. And shockingly enough, we also got some extremely exciting information for not only Miles Morales, but also for Spider-Man PS4. But to begin with Miles himself, Insomniac did post two separate updates relating to the game. The first of which is actually another promotional video for the game showcasing a text exchange between Miles Morales and his best friend Genki Lee. And not only does this video do a great job of further deepening the bond between both Miles and Genki, but it also confirms that Genki himself is the one to craft the tracksuit for Miles. It's always fun to learn more about the narrative purposes that are applied to each individual costume within Insomniac's universe. And knowing that Genki is actually the one to design and create the tracksuit for Miles just makes him an even more reliable resource. And what's better is that this recent video also comes fully equipped with a complete Easter egg to a very popular Spider-Man character, who was actually also previously teased within Spider-Man PS4 in one of the collectible backpacks. But just seeing his name pop up again within Miles Morales' game is nothing short of exciting. And of course, I am talking about none other than Eddie Brock. But again, based on the final post-credit scene that we did see in Spider-Man PS4, I do think that Insomniac is setting up the storyline of having Harry Osborn become Venom instead of Eddie Brock. But regardless, the amount of narrative possibilities that Insomniac can take within their own Spider-Man universe is pretty much infinite at this point. And whether or not we actually end up receiving another tease to Venom by the end of Miles Morales' story, we'll just have to wait and see. But still, I am extremely hyped nonetheless. And speaking of hype, this is where the new suits come into play, where Insomniac did reveal not only the tracksuit, but another brand new costume within their most recent Daily Bugle article. And boy, after getting a closer look at both these suits, I'm still having trouble as to which one I want to try on first. But as the headline of the story states, new Spider-Man's got style. Spidey's partner has a closet that rivals the style of the original web slinger, where of course in traditional Daily Bugle fashion, the story was written by none other than Betty Brant with photos by Justin West. And as the article describes, they may share the same moniker, but the new Spider-Man is starting to define his own identity apart from his mentor. In addition to honing his own spider moves, Spidey's partner is starting to show New York City that he's got an eye for fashion. Take a look at two of the freshest suits we've ever seen, debuted by the new Spider-Man. And of course, that statement is supposed to be taken literally, considering the fact that both of these suits are 110% completely original designs from Insomniac games. And based on the artistry that we do have for both of these costumes, Insomniac have completely outdone themselves. So to begin with the suit we've already seen, but we now have a closer look of, is of course the tracksuit. The new Spider-Man swung through the city in a second suit that elevated his heroic silhouette, where the primary design itself is actually incorporating elements of the advanced suit, where of course that is in relation to the massive amounts of white, saying that it is an evolution of his classic red and black suit. And as this detail was also indicated by Genki's blueprints, this article does state that it looks like it's made of a breathable fabric so Spider-Man can swing through the city without breaking a sweat. And based on the recent gameplay of the tracksuit that we did see of it in motion, actually seeing him be able to take out enemies while wearing this thing just looks insane. However, nothing looks more insane and completely badass than this most recent costume that we did receive of Miles, now dubbed the Crimson Cowl. And essentially, this is pretty much Miles' version of the classic Scarlet Spider suit. And as the article states, could it be a two-piece? Spider-Man looks like he's ready to hit the gym in this slick athletic suit. Some call it a hood, others call it a cowl. Regardless, it's never been done before, and it's a look our new Spider-Man owns. I am absolutely in love with all of the creative freedoms that Insomniac is able to take with their own unique Spider-Man designs, and being able to witness them add that same amount of style to Miles as his own Spider-Man is just a beautiful thing thing to see. But even though Miles is coming in strong with his own unique threads to wear in his own game, don't forget that we're also going to be receiving the Amazing Spider-Man 1 movie costume, as well as 2 other mysterious suits within Marvel's Spider-Man Remastered. And as of today, it's also been officially confirmed by James Stevenson himself from Insomniac Games that the 3 new suits that will be featured in Marvel's Spider-Man Remastered are also going to be arriving to none other than Spider-Man PS4. So this question has been asked quite frequently ever since the announcement of Marvel's Spider-Man Remastered. And knowing that we now have an official answer to this question is just a great factor to be aware of. So as this question was initially asked by fellow Twitter user and massive Spider-Man fan Mr. Sandman, he went on to reply to James on Twitter by saying, "I love your guys' unique marketing. Keep up the great work. Also, if you don't mind asking, are the 3 new suits exclusive to Spider-Man Remaster, or will it also be available on PlayStation 4? And as James surprisingly replied to that question, he did state, "I spent a bunch of time chasing this for you, and I'm pleased to say they will come to the PS4. However, the exact timing as to when the suits are going to be included within Spider-Man PS4 is still yet to be determined." So even though we don't know for sure when exactly the 3 new suits are going to be featured within Spider-Man PS4, I still can't help but to have this reaction to all this amazing news. So if you're someone like me who's sadly not able to acquire a PlayStation 5 at launch, the new content that is also going to be featured in Spider-Man Remastered is going to be included in the original version on PlayStation 4. And if these were all the details that we received about the suits for both Spider-Man PS4 as well as Marvel's Spider-Man Miles Morales, then I can only imagine what Insomniac have in store next. But with all that said, everyone, that's the video I have for you today, and please let me know all your thoughts in the comments section down below. What do you think about these crazy Spider-Man updates, and which suit out of Miles' collection that we have seen so far is your absolute favorite? Even though I'm going to be wearing the classic red and black Spider-Man suit throughout the duration of my first playthrough of Miles Morales, I still can't wait to actually give the Crimson Cowl suit a try once we do unlock it within the game. But until the next news update, everyone, thank you all so much for watching. Stay spectacular, Spidey fans. Feel free to like the video and subscribe to the channel if you did enjoy. And without further ado, peace out.